Welcome to episode 3 of the Simple to Understand podcast. I am your host, Dean Douglas. My guest today is my good friend Mitchell Clinton, who goes by the name of Mitch, and he is a Winnipeg Jets reporter. And for those who might not know who the Winnipeg Jets are, they are a professional hockey team who play in the National Hockey League or NHL. And he has the unique opportunity to actually travel with the Winnipeg Jets across North America. In this episode, we lift the veil on what goes on behind the scenes with regards to a lot of the various types of marketing that gets produced and distributed through multiple media platforms. We talk about the evolution of social media and the growing impact it has on large sports franchises, as well as the amount of effort and teamwork that goes into producing a top-of-the-line end product that ends up getting distributed to millions of fans watching around North America and the world. For those of you who might be listening to this podcast for the first time, welcome. The structure I've created for each episode, and this has happened quite organically since my first episode, and it will evolve over time, goes something like this. I want my guests to tell their story with as much detail as possible, and they're comfortable sharing, starting first with where they were born, and then I do my best to guide their story by asking a sequence of questions, trying to pull out the fun, helpful, and meaningful stories along the way. Eventually, this will lead us to the present day on what they're working on, and we'll wrap up by asking some questions geared towards the future. Simplified, each episode is a past, present, and future look at my guests, and I've structured a longer format podcast, typically an hour and a half and more, so as to provide context and a number of other reasons which I will share over time. So without going into too much detail on who Mitch is, because you'll just have to listen to the episode for the full rich experience of that, here is a short bio on Mitch. Mitch has been around hockey constantly since around 5 or 6 years old and has been officiating or reffing since 13. His first exposure to broadcasting was after university, where he worked at 730 CKDM, where he got to read sports and newscasts, among many other things. He also played midget AA hockey throughout most of high school, so as you can probably gather by now, he's a hockey guy through and through. Mitch also has a degree in journalism with a minor in political science, which he attained from the University of Winnipeg, and also a diploma in journalism where he graduated from the Creative Communications program at Red River College. He joined the Winnipeg Jets in November of 2013, originally as their web content coordinator, and this position evolved quickly, as did the rise of digital marketing and social media. Mitch is also one of the hosts of the Winnipeg Jets podcast, Ground Control. Finally, I encourage listeners to stay to the end because when asked where do you see the NHL heading in the future and things you might want to see corrected, his answer intrigued me and I'm hoping will spark some curious thoughts from you guys. Let me know what you think of his answer along with any other parts of the episode and share your feedback by heading over to www.simpletounderstand.com. Lastly, you can also head over to www.simpletounderstand.com to find the show notes for this episode and any other previous episode. Everything's linked up and packaged nicely on there, so feel free to check that out. If there's something that you really took from this episode, it should be linked up there. So go over there, check it out. It's for you guys. And that's it, guys. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Thanks for spending the time with me and Mitch, and enjoy. All right, here we go. Mitch, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. This is awesome. We've been trying to sort out a day that would work, so I'm glad that we finally found one.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Of course.
So we are recording this in our basement, which we haven't done before, so hopefully the sound quality is absolutely perfect.
I'm sure it'll be good.
I'm sure it'll be good. So let's just start with telling us where you were born.
I was born in Winnipeg, actually, and then I don't really remember too much of Winnipeg as an infant. I'm sure not many people do, but when I was about 2 years old, we moved from Winnipeg to Killarney, Manitoba, which is kind of right down by the U.S. border in kind of the Westman area, if you will. I think it was about 20 minutes, 25 minutes from like the International Peace Garden, just to kind of give an idea. And then when I was 13, so in 2001, we moved to Dauphin, Manitoba. That's where my parents still live. Yeah. And in 2006, the fall, I came back to Winnipeg for school. And now my wife and I and our little dog Jet live just outside of Winnipeg. So it's I've been in and around Manitoba my whole life.
And what's it like living and growing up in Dauphin, Manitoba? It
was awesome. One of the main things that I really take away from there is I moved there when I was 13. So really at a point in your life as I don't know, adolescence the wrong word, but an early teenager, where you're really kind of starting to form like some bonds with some people, so you're really close. So then to kind of move from Killarney and leave the core group of friends that I've had since I was a really young guy was tough, but I kind of met some people here in Dauphin really quickly. And then I was in grade 8, which was kind of like where the middle school ended in Dauphin, and then you went on to the big school, which was grades 9 to 12. And then that kind of combined everybody. So I met kind of like more a bigger group of friends there. And I mean, I'm kind of lucky because this year I was able to go to a wedding for one of my best friends from Killarney, kind of early in October. Yeah. And then, I'm in another wedding coming up in August for a friend here in Winnipeg. So it's worked out really well.
Yeah, nice. And so Dauphin, I think I've been once when I was younger. It's a big hockey town, like rural Manitoba.
Yeah,
hockey's a big thing, right?
Very, There's a Manitoba Junior Hockey League team there called the Dauphin Kings, and actually, it was because of the radio station that covers that team that I was able to kind of get my start doing what I do in terms of broadcasting. 7:30 CKDM, they took a real big chance on a guy that to that point was really only, I had, I think maybe a year of university under my belt, if that, but no formal broadcasting training. But because I was a local guy, they were kind of willing to take a look at me over the summer part-time. So that was really helpful because, I mean, I got a little bit of, doing on-location work, reading sportscasts, reading newscasts, that kind of stuff. But then also Kevin Jeffrey, who was the sports director at the time, he was doing play-by-play for the Dauphin Kings on the road and at home and all that kind of stuff. So he just kind of said, hey, like when we're around Winnipeg, which the MJHL's got Portage, they got the Winnipeg Blues, they got Selkirk, number of teams. He was like, whenever the team is around Winnipeg, would you want to just come on and do some color commentary, which I had never done in my life, but was really interested in it. And, thanks to him for giving me the chance to do it. And we had a lot of fun doing that. And then by the time I was done my time at Red River College in 2010, the Dauphin and the Dauphin Kings were hosting the national championship, the Royal Bank Cup in 2010. So that was really, really neat. And luckily Kevin and CKDM had me back to do pre and post games. So it was a lot of work, but I wouldn't have any of the opportunities I do now if I didn't have that shot way back when in that one summer. So you talk about how important Dauphin was to my upbringing. I mean, it was basically where everything started for me.
Yeah. And though I'm not too familiar with hockey, so this is good because the whole premise of podcast is making things that I don't really understand and trying to make them simple to understand for everyone else. So I'm familiar with Brandon Weekings. Yep. Is that the same level, or in terms of like what
it's
the team
a little
was
bit?
At Dauphin?
I would say it's a little bit different. So the WHL is where the Brandon Weekings play. They're part of the Canadian Junior Hockey League, I guess, or the CHL as they're called. Yeah. Which includes the WHL where the Weekings are, the OHL out of Ontario, and the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. Usually, what'll happen is players will try to get into that league first, whether it's even as young as, I believe you can get into some of these leagues as young as 15, but you got to get a real special exempt from Hockey Canada to be able to do that. But most players, especially if they're really good, get in at around 16, 17. Some get in at about 18. I would say the players that maybe don't get into the Western Hockey League, Ontario Hockey League, QMJHL, the next way to get into that would be the Manitoba Junior Hockey League, where the Kings are. for Dauphin, Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. Pretty much every province across Canada has kind of like a Junior A hockey league, if you will.
Okay.
And the Western Hockey League and where the Wheat Kings are is known as Major Junior. So it's a little bit of a step below, but there are still so many opportunities to either go from that Junior A league up into the WHL. There's been a number of players that have done that. Mm-hmm. And also another good thing about kind of Junior A leagues like the MJHL is the opportunity to earn your way into NCAA commitments or what do they call it now? U Sports, not CIS. I was going to call it CIS, but to play for teams like the University of Manitoba and stuff like that. So regardless of what level of hockey you get into from high school, I mean, you have the opportunity to take it to whatever level you want. So the Dauphin Kings are kind of, I would say, just like a shade below like the WHL, but the age ranges for both leagues are roughly the same.
Yeah. And did you play hockey in Dauphin?
I did.
Yeah?
Yeah, I played. I was lucky because I knew pretty early on that I wasn't going to be one of those people going to any of those leagues. I love to play the game. I love to kind of like being in a dressing room around the team and just everything that came along with being a young hockey player, I guess.
Yeah.
But I knew very early on it wouldn't really be my full career. I did want to be around the game, but I didn't think I would be playing it.
Yeah.
So I played midget AA throughout most of high school, and then I played my final year in grade 12. I played high school hockey. And then I was involved in officiating the game since I was 13 till I was about 21 or 22. And then I kind of just got out of it, mostly because I was getting really busy with university and school and my job starting and everything like that around that time. So I just kind of, something had to go, and it had to be that, unfortunately, but because I did enjoy it. Obviously, you get every official everywhere has a hockey parent story, but it is what it is. It's one of the things that makes the game great is how kind of passionate everybody is about it. So yeah, I've been around the game of hockey constantly since I kind of started playing. I think I started playing when I was 5 or 6 back in Killarney, and just loved it ever since.
Yeah. And officiating, is that reffing?
Yeah.
Is that reffing again?
Yeah. So like you can be either what we would call the head man or the referee, which is the guy that's got the orange bands on that calls the penalties and majority of that, or you can be a linesman, which is the guy that is kind of in charge of icings, offsides, and breaking up scrums in front of the net, which is always a fun part. So I found I was a better linesman than I was a head official, but that's just kind of became my preference.
Yeah.
Mostly because going into scrums, I mean, I'm 6'4". I'm not thick by any means, but I'm 6'4", so I got the reach that I can go in there and separate some guys if I have to. So
yeah.
But I do remember the first time that I was ever doing kind of like being a linesman for an MJHL level. So like the Dauphin Kings have their camp, and then they have their inter-squad game, which kind of determines the final few guys that make the spots on the roster. And that was kind of my first taste of officiating at that level. And I remember I went to go break up my first actual gloves on the ground fight. And usually with minor hockey, as soon as the officials get in there, get their hands on them and kind of start to tug, the players pull away, and that's it. They're all really just trying to be tough, I guess.
Not this time.
Yeah, I was in the exact same position at that age too. So I go to break up this fight at this inter-squad game, and I go to pull, and they're not moving. And I'm just like, okay, then we got a problem. These guys have been working out all summer. They're not coming apart very easily. So I had to throw a little bit of weight behind it, and finally they kind of came apart. But that just kind of shows, I mean, the guys that do it at the highest level, I mean, they're pulling apart athletes that are A, really wanting to go at each other, and B, have been working out constantly. So they are in incredible shape. So the officials have to be as well.
Yeah, for sure. And so you went to high school in Dauphin, and then you moved to Winnipeg after high school?
Yeah.
And what was the main reason for that?
Just for school. So I started at the University of Winnipeg in the fall of 2006 and did 2 years there, and then went to Red River College in the Creative Communications program to do kind of all my broadcasting and journalism, PR, kind of that kind of stuff, education. And then one of the big things that my mom and I kind of talked about throughout high school and even throughout university, as impatient as I was with the process, was I wanted to finish with some sort of a degree. So as good as the program at Red River was at the time that I graduated in 2010, the best you could come out of there with was a major in journalism, which was good. And I mean, you're pretty much work ready when that program is done. But I really wanted a degree, and so to do that, I had to go back to UW for one more year, which I always said was really tough because I started doing 2 years of university, and you're writing 10 to 15 page papers on anything under the sun, which is fine. That's kind of the way that they do things there. And I learned to write about other things other than sports. So like I ended up with like a minor in political science as well. Don't quiz me on anything political science because I can't remember any of it. But at the time, I really knew a lot about kind of the history of politics in this country. And then you go into Red River and you learn everything that it takes to put on, whether it's a newscast like CTV does or something like Sports Center, or you learn everything about advertising campaigns, PR related information, just all that kind of stuff. And for a journalist standpoint, which is what I was mostly interested in, you learn how to write real, concise stuff. I mean, whether you're working for a newspaper where you got 400 words and you got to pick your best 400, you know what I mean? You learn how to do that. So to go from writing, those 400 to 800 word articles to go back for 1 year to go back writing to 15 page papers again, it was a little bit of an adjustment, and I wasn't super thrilled about going back and having to do that. But in the end, I ended with a joint degree in communications. So I'm just glad I'm glad I have it. I'm glad it's done. It was a really tough decision to go back and do it, to finish it, but I knew it was something that was important to get done and get, not necessarily out of the way, but just have all the education that I needed done, and that way I could kind of focus on the career that was ahead.
Yeah, and for the CKDM program, because you and I both went to Red River, but I went into business, majored in marketing in my second year. Mm-hmm. And so I know and I didn't hear about CKDM until I think it was after my first year. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a great program. Yeah. And I know it's highly competitive.
Very.
There was a waiting list to get in at the time. I think I graduated in 2011 or 2012, so around the same time as when you graduated. So what's the first year and then the second year? Is the first year you dabble in
pretty
everything?
Much. Yeah. They want you to get a taste of everything. And even since I graduated in 2010, I mean, it's kind of weird to think that it's been 9 years since I graduated from there. Yeah. So the program has definitely evolved since I've been there, but I know I can speak to kind of the experience that I had when I was there. So the first year, you pretty much took courses in advertising, PR, journalism, and what we called broadcast at the time, but I believe is now called multimedia production. Yeah. Just so that you could get your feet wet everywhere, and you kind of had the basic skills to be kind of a well-rounded employee kind of in the communications area. But it also gave you a taste of exactly what all this stuff is about. Because I know I went in with an idea of what journalism was, but it took taking a few courses to kind of understand exactly what it really was. You know what I mean? And
in what capacity you wanted to go.
Yeah, for sure. And like even just the high level, and this wasn't just journalism, this was everything involved with the program, like things like and stuff you wouldn't even think of. So say like Tim Hortons. Is there an apostrophe S or is there no apostrophe? You know what I mean? So like you don't even think about it. You have it in front of you and you're just looking at it. And the way that CKDM worked was, since that's a proper name, it's a business name, one that you can't really afford to have wrong in your piece. It would become an instant auto fail if it was wrong. So what it does is it drills into you to A, double check, but B, it also drills in, and I'm pretty sure I still remember it does not have an apostrophe. So just little things like that. Like it's just, that's the kind of level that they expected out of their students. But that's why it's such a program that I think was so sought after. I tried to get into it my first year out of high school and didn't get in. And then I reapplied after my first year at university and was lucky enough to get in. But they allow you to defer. So I deferred 1 year so I could go back to UW and get my second year under my belt and maybe get a little bit more prepared. And that was important because it ended up being a really smart decision just to be able to, like I said, write about a bunch of different things. And then the second year of creative communications, you pick your major. So for me, it was journalism.
What are the other majors?
There was, advertising is another one, public relations, and media production.
Okay.
So media production focused primarily on everything behind the camera, not even just shooting. A lot of it was about editing, the different spots that are in the studio for like newscasts and all that kind of stuff. And even putting together things like documentaries, which is a very different shooting style than shooting for news. It kind of gave students a whole different perspective on what that can really be. And even guys that I went to school with now are off to doing like documentary shoots and stuff. And some of the places that these people have ended up just to do this stuff is so interesting. So then you can pretty much major in any of the four. I chose journalism, obviously, and I've been happy with the decision. One of the coolest days for me in that program, and I know it's evolved since I've been there, was we called it Live at 5. That was Thursdays, where we would, have our story meeting in the morning, and just combine the journalism and broadcast majors, and you'd be paired up. There'd be there'd be two people one week that would be like the anchors. There'd be one that would be the sports anchor, one that would do weather, just to kind of get a taste of what that's like. And then everybody else would be kind of paired up, and you'd go out, you'd shoot your story, voice it, write it, put it together, and your deadline was 3:30 or 4 o'clock. And then at 5, we would be live online. Just, there would be a link that your parents could watch and all that kind of stuff, and you would do an actual newscast in the studio that's in the Princess Street campus. So that was always my favorite day. It was a long day. It usually started at 8 and you'd end at 6 after the show was done, but it was really cool. And by the second year, it was awesome because I had Fridays off, so I could have the really long day on Thursday and take Friday to either catch up on homework or whatever, go home for the weekend, like anything like that. So I used to really love Thursdays in second year. It was great.
Yeah. And then you did 1 year after at U of W.
Yeah.
So what made you want to get into journalism even pre going to U of W?
Well, it was when I was young. I mean, I'd get up in the morning and I'd watch TSN every morning, and I always wanted to be that guy, the guy that was at the desk. So eventually I found out exactly what I would need to do that. So I was lucky all through high school and everything like that. Just, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. So I could gear everything in high school toward that. And then that being said, even when I got to university, you really don't understand how many options there are out there until you get there. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, marketing sounds kind of cool. I never really thought about that. You know what I mean? And then, or you could, for me, I took a couple of courses in kinesiology just because I like to pretend at least I was an athlete for most of my life, so I really was interested in learning things behind, like theories behind coaching kids and coaching athletes and what that's all like. And so I took a little bit of courses in that, and that kind of piques your interest a little bit more maybe in that direction. And it's interesting, even for a guy that was as committed to one type of career as I was just like, oh, this is neat. So that's why I'm always like, when people go to university, like my sister, like I believe she started going to university for music therapy, and then she took some courses in it, and she's like, okay, well, this is all right. It's not exactly what I thought. But then now she's a psych nurse in North Battleford and loves it. Wow. But never would have thought about psychiatric nursing until she got there and learned what it was all about and found that's where her true passion was, right? So I always say I've always been really fortunate that I knew what I wanted to do, and that career path never really changed. But because of kind of the experiences that I had, I'm always just like, well, even if you go to university and you have an idea of it, just keep your mind open, because you never know what path could end up piquing your interest.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. I know the previous gentleman that I had on my podcast, Scott McKenzie, my brother-in-law, him and I talked about the differences between university and college, and the different routes that like people take, the pros and cons of both. University obviously being more theory based,
right? College
being more practical, hands-on. That
Definitely.
One day, like on the Thursday, that's real
the best
life.
Day.
Yeah, and that's real life, right? Like you do that when you're working in that profession.
Yeah,
so that's awesome experience. And so after college, so you after university, you get your degree.
Yeah.
Tell me about like the different opportunities that you were wanting to explore. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you mentioned TSN was one area. So just walk us through the next kind of steps.
It was really glamorous. It was 4 months of nothing after that. I was not...
I've been there.
Yeah, it's different because, like I said, you feel so work ready and everything, but, you know, the opportunities, just because in and around that time, and even to this day, the media landscape continues to change so much. I applied for a number of things in a number of different cities, but nothing was really coming together, and just a place that I ended up doing an internship with at Shaw TV Winnipeg was looking for a sports reporter, and obviously they were somewhat familiar with me because they worked with me about a year earlier, and figured I'd be a good fit, and I kind of threw my name in there as the guy that maybe wouldn't have as much experience, but I think I was basically on the premise that, listen, I could be molded. You know, you tell me what you want and I can pretty much do it. And so I was lucky to start with them in September. And really from there, they taught me a lot there. There was one reporter there by the name of Kim Babbage that I worked with a lot during my internship, but she was still there while I started working there. And she had done some sports as well. So she kind of knew her way around the broadcasting area from how Shaw did things. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I did everything from just covering regular everyday stories in Winnipeg about different athletes to live broadcasts of the Winnipeg Goldeyes, especially during their 2012 season, which was awesome because they won the league championship that year. Mm-hmm. So that was really cool to be a part of. Hosted my own sports show, and like that's all this stuff I had never really done before outside of college, but it was cool to be able to do it at that level and to learn everything that goes into it, and making sure you were able to put together a good product every day. And even on top of that, I did some things that weren't sports. So like we went out to Festival one time, the whole crew that, I think there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 reporters. We all just kind of went out there, covered a different aspect of Festival, and so I got to experience that. Myself and another reporter, Jay Williams, we jumped into ice cold water for the polar bear dare a couple of times. That was an experience.
Was that during Festival de Voyage?
No, I think it was a month before. It was out in Lac du Bonny, I remember. But I remember us both jumping in there and then just making a beeline for the hot tub. And oh, it's a weird feeling because when you're in that really cold water, you're just like, I got to get out of here. And then you get out, you get in the hot tub, and then it is like about 10 seconds later, it is the best feeling ever because your body's like so relaxed.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if it's got something to do with cold into the hot or anything like that, but it is something else. So basically, with Shaw TV Winnipeg, I covered everything from jumping in ice cold water to baseball championships to everything in between. So it was extremely helpful because we talked about with Red River, you just you're more well rounded. You're just able to cover anything and everything whenever the need is.
Well, you get that breadth, right?
Yeah.
And you got to so we're when you jumped in the water in Lac du Bonny, is that just is there like the lake in Lac du Bonny?
Yep, they just cut a big hole in it. And I believe the funds went to kids sport, if I remember correctly. Yeah, you had to raise a certain amount of money to be able to jump in the lake. So it was, they just cut a big hole in it.
And then down you go.
It's the weirdest feeling ever to just be standing there and you're like, I am doing this of my own free will. And then you go. But yeah, they were good about it. Like, they kind of give you the rundown of like, okay, so if you are in trouble, this is what you do. This is the main thing to focus on when you jump in there. They're just like, all the air is going to want to leave your body, so just be calm. Like, as long as you're expecting all that stuff to happen or to be aware of it, usually it's not that big a deal, and they got personnel there to help you out if you need. So they make it as safe as humanly possible, and the water's not that deep. Like, I remember you jump in, and like I said before, I'm 6'4", so I could pretty much touch anywhere.
Yeah.
But where they were, I think I would stand up and the water was in around my chest. So lots of room.
Good.
And
you wouldn't get pulled with like some under.
No, exactly. Yeah. My guess is they look into that pretty extensively just to make sure. And yeah, so like it was fun though. I always tell people that, like, as much as crazy as it sounds, it's worth it for the 10 seconds later in the hot tub. Don't do it if it's not at a sanctioned event. But if it's at something like that, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, sounds fun. It's like a bare bones Nordic thermal experience.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Good way to put it.
Yeah, nice. And then so you did Shaw TV for
2 years, but
2 years.
I think it was like 2 years and 1 month or something like that. Like, it was pretty. It felt like I learned a ton, so it didn't feel like a long time, because every day I felt like I was learning something different. But then when the opportunity with the Winnipeg Jets popped up, it was. I mean, given the fact that they had just kind of come back within 2 seasons of that. I mean, I was happy to kind of have the opportunity afforded to me to join in at that point, because they were a team that, while they'd been there for a couple seasons, obviously there was a ton of passion around them, but it felt like they were just kind of starting to build toward some of the great things that have happened over the last 5 years. So, when I got the call that I was coming in even for an interview, I was jacked up about it. So you were at Shaw TV until what year? 2013 it would have been. I think I went through October, and then I joined the Jets November 2nd of 2013.
2013. And when did the Winnipeg Jets come back to Winnipeg?
The announcement was May 31st, 2011. And then that they were coming, that the purchase had been made by True North. And then, so then there was the 2011-2012 season, then 2012-13, then, 2011-2012, and then 2012-13.
Yeah.
And then, I got in to what would have been the start of the 13-14 season.
So start of the third season.
Yeah.
And because this is a podcast and could be picked up by somebody outside of Canada, I'm going to ask you a funny question, because we are in Winnipeg.
Sure.
For those who don't know about the Winnipeg Jets, maybe give a background on who the Winnipeg Jets are. For those who, believe it or not, there are people in this universe that don't know about the Winnipeg Jets.
It's all good. So the Winnipeg Jets are a team in the National Hockey League, one of 31, soon to be 32, with Seattle coming in a couple of years' time. But anyway, so the big connection between Winnipeg and the Jets stems back to before I was born. I'm even still learning a bunch of stuff about They played in the WHA, the World Hockey Association. I believe that was back in the 70s. And then the reason there's so much passion for the team, even outside of the fact that they're in Canada and hockey's one of the big, if not the biggest sport in this country, was the team left in 1996. And around that time, the Canadian dollar was kind of all over the map against the U.S. and so it obviously cost more money to run a team in Canada. And despite some great efforts by both, I believe, the National Hockey League and the ownership involved and groups involved here in Winnipeg, it just wasn't feasible. to keep the team here, so they moved off to Phoenix. And I think that left kind of a big, huge void here for a while. But a lot of credit goes to Mark Chipman and his group with I believe it was, I can't remember, like I don't know exactly if they were still called True North at the time. But anyway, they made sure they brought the IHL to Winnipeg as quickly as they could to get hockey back in Winnipeg, professional hockey back in Winnipeg. And they started out with the Manitoba Moose and kind of built that franchise. And then kind of the next step was the building of MTS Center, now Bell MTS Place in downtown Winnipeg. It's kind of a part of a big downtown revitalization that they got going. And the Moose continued to get better and better and better. They were the American Hockey League affiliate of the Vancouver Canucks. So players would get called up to the NHL from the Moose to the Vancouver Canucks. And there was one season, I want to say it was 2008 or 2009, that the Manitoba Moose made it all the way to the American Hockey League final. So that was cool. I think it was during my college years, so it's definitely either 08 or 09. So they kind of became part of the Winnipeg community, and part of the fabric of Winnipeg was the AHL team. And then, and I've heard Mark talk about it to the media a number of times, just the fact that they ran that franchise as if it was a National Hockey League team. And that was really important to them, because they wanted to show the NHL that, this is professional hockey that we have in Winnipeg, and we're going to treat it that way regardless of if, it's the American Hockey League or the National Hockey League. This is what we're capable of doing. And, so when the opportunity came up to purchase the Atlanta Thrashers, I think the National Hockey League kind of had Mark on speed dial, because they're like, look at the good things that they're doing here in Winnipeg. And then boom, May 31st, 2011, it's all done, and they're coming back. So, and that was huge. I mean, I remember I was working for Shaw TV kind of not at the time of the announcement, but by the time the team was back, I was working for Shaw, and I remember we were doing what we call streeters, which is you just kind of walk the streets in and around many of the parties that were surrounding the home opener that year, and you just ask random fans for their memories of either whether it's the old Jets or what they're looking forward to this year. How does it feel to have them back? And just being kind of part of that excitement was awesome. And to see the home opener live was incredible. Like there's only a few times I've heard the rink like that.
Did you go to the home opener?
I did, yeah.
So the very first game back?
Yeah, I was there. And it's funny because between Bell MTS Place and City Place, through the Skywalk, there's a huge mural on the wall. Mural's probably the wrong word. It's like they've blown up a photograph, really. And I can completely pick out where I was sitting at the game, mm-hmm. because I was wearing a light blue dress shirt, and I'm taller than pretty much anybody else. So I could totally point out exactly where I was. And of course, Winnipeg lost the game 5-1, to Montreal. But I mean, they got cheered off the ice just because they were back, right? So it was something to really cool to be a part of, and that's kind of what the team means to this city. Like it's a lot of the players I know that come here. That's something that they like. Playing in front of this fan base here in Winnipeg is something that they cherish, and they definitely don't take for granted in that room. So it's cool to kind of be. I don't want to say a part of it because I'm not a player, but just being able to be around it as often as I am is awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely one of the strongest communities. Just the support that Winnipeg gives to its hockey team is
unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And is Winnipeg the city that started way back before 1996, before they left, they started the whiteout?
Yes, yeah. So if memory serves me correctly, and I wouldn't have been very old when this happened, but I know back in the day the Jets had a rivalry with, whether it was Edmonton or Calgary, is who their bigger rivalry with at the time is up for debate. But one of the things that Calgary used to do is the Sea of Red. So in the playoffs, they all wear red. And I believe there was a playoff series between the two teams, and they were looking for a way to kind of counteract that. So, and I don't remember who came up with it. There was a video that we played in game, I think it was last year, that kind of talked about the start of the whiteout and everything, and it kind of was just like, everybody's got a white shirt.
Yeah,
just bring it. And so like it's brilliant when you think about it. So yeah, people just started wearing white, and then you look at the whiteout that we had during the playoff run last year, and people are wearing either all white suits, or they're just wearing white shirts, or they're just buying some of the stuff that's available at Jets Gear. Like there was a variety. Some people were wearing bed sheets. Like it's whatever you got, and it just creates such a cool look in that rink. And so I believe that's how it started way back when. It was kind of like, well, let's counteract that sea of red with a whiteout, and I think when the Jets made the playoffs again for the first time since being back, that was in 2015. It was so cool because I'd never seen one live.
Yeah.
You would see the highlights and stuff like that of the old Winnipeg arena and everything, but yeah, to actually see it in person and just the crazy atmosphere it creates, and when the Jets score in that atmosphere, it is unbelievable. So.
Yeah. And they also gave out at every seat, because I went to that game as well, and they gave white little towels.
Yes.
And I've been to Pittsburgh to see NFL game.
Oh, yeah.
And they have the crazy towel, and they wave it around, and same
yellow
thing.
Towel.
Yeah, the yellow towel.
Yeah,
and to have the white out with the white towels was quite the combo.
It's spine tingling when I think about it.
It's is awesome. For sure. So you started in, what was your role when you started with the Jets? Yeah,
so my role's kind of evolved. It's been the same, but it's evolved, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
I started out, my title was Web Content Coordinator, I think is what it was.
Okay.
Because covering a hockey team for the team and through the website and through social media was just kind of building at that point. It was very much in its infancy still. And so I would basically, part of my job was social media, like the live tweeting of games and stuff like that. The other part of it was writing player profiles, doing player interviews, and then keeping the website up to date. There were two of us that did that. Mm-hmm. And then as it kind of grew, the other part of it would be we would write kind of these bigger features for the in-game magazine that fans could get when they came to the rink. Mm-hmm. And then as it grew and the digital world kind of continued to get bigger, whether it's social media, including now Snapchat and then Instagram stories, and then they just that part got bigger and bigger, and then what the website was capable of doing got bigger and bigger. We kind of started to realize we needed more help. So at the beginning of, it would have been last season, we went from 2 to 4 people. And then my title changed to just simply Jets TV Reporter, where my job basically is covering the team on a daily basis, writing updates from practice, pregame skates, postgame reports, doing some on-camera stuff as well for similar reasons. Sponsored pieces, we used to have one called Ask a Jet, where basically fans could submit questions about any player, and especially ones that we recently acquired through trade or something like that. Mm-hmm. They could send questions in, and we would, if we chose their question, they'd get 50 Jets reward points, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So that was just my job, in addition to some website stuff as well. And then we hired Jamie Thomas, who's kind of our Jets TV host, because what we were adding on to our coverage was live pre- and post-game shows for every home game. And so those are still going, by the way. Those are on winnipegjets.com, the app, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube.
Okay.
So when I'll travel, I would say so far it's seemingly the majority of the games, because the other part of Jamie's job is hosting various kind of corporate events at Bell MTS Place. So that leaves him a little bit more free to do stuff like that, like the gala dinner and all those kinds of things, which are important as well. So he handles the majority of those, and then I'll handle a bit more of the road responsibility. But even still, being able to kind of split that a little bit with him has been helpful, just for making sure that we don't burn out or anything like that.
Yeah.
And then behind the scenes, we hired another extra guy that can shoot, edit, and then also kind of run the actual show itself, because it is a big production to run those pre and post game shows. Because like for a little behind the scenes look, during the post game shows, so Jamie will be sitting at the desk talking about whether it's highlights or something from the game. I'm in the dressing room with usually the guy's name is Daniel. We're in there kind of shooting the post-game interviews. Daniel's wearing a backpack that's called a DeGiro.
Okay.
So what it does is whatever the camera shoots feeds into the DeGiro, and then over a kind of a wireless signal gets sent back to where Tyler is sitting there doing the show. So he can see the interview pop up, but he can't hear anything because he's listening to Jamie. So after the interview's done, I literally text him and say, yeah, it's good to go. Like, no audio issues, no nothing, like, good to go. And so he'll tell Jamie that we're good to go. Jamie will say, here's a post-game interview, and up it goes, literally seconds after it happened.
Wow.
Yeah, so, like, we do that. We usually do about 3 post-game interviews, and then Paul Maurice kind of has his own, like, little press conference area that he does his stuff in, and then once Tyler sees him pop up, kind of same thing happens, and away it goes. And it's so it's been cool, like, just to kind of see where things started with to now we have the 4 people that I mentioned, plus I rarely touch social media anymore because it's so big that we've got a guy, his name's John Delaney, that handles the majority of that, and he's kept busy every single day. So it's been cool to kind of see how our team has grown, both on the ice and then obviously with how we do our work.
Mm-hmm. And for those who don't know, Paul Maurice is the coach.
Head coach of the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And then, so social media probably, well, it's evolved and it's changed since you've began.
Yeah.
And what profile social media platforms did you start with and that it's got to at this point?
Yeah, so for the main one for us way back when was Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. When I started with the team, had like kind of just got going. Yeah. If I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. So those are the kind of the 3 main ones. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of the teams in the NHL already had those prior like Twitter and Facebook for sure. Yeah. Prior to us getting into the league. Yeah. In 2011. So we were kind of starting behind the 8 ball, and as much as there was like a surge right at the beginning of people following because we were a new team and all that kind of stuff, it still takes a while to continue to build. Yeah. To get to the level that whether it's Toronto or Montreal or any of those teams, even now they're over 1 million. Wow. Followers, which is there's only a few National Hockey League teams that are at that level, and like teams like Toronto and Montreal, of course, have the history and the population base and all that to kind of have a little bit of an edge there. But we're still doing our best every day to kind of get there. So so it started with those 3 for sure, and then kind of as the years went on, Snapchat became a thing. Mm-hmm. So Snapchat stories are something that we have to add to, and then Instagram stories followed shortly after that. Now Facebook stories are also a thing. Yeah. So it's a lot of those platforms fall into John's responsibility, and he does a really good job in terms of just not only managing it all, because what he's getting, not outside of the content that he's just, whether it's taking a photo and putting it on Instagram, outside of all that stuff, he's getting fed, whether it's sponsored and corporate info that he has to get out, which is important. He's also getting fed content from us, usually every single day of the week, unless there's an off day. He's got at least 3 interviews from the room, plus coaches' availability to put up, plus whatever we write or shoot that day from a coverage standpoint. And then it's just outside of that, there's still more stuff that I'm sure I don't know about. So he's got a lot to keep straight. And that's just on the Jets account, right? So the other thing that he kind of keeps an eye on or assists with when necessary is, we still have the Manitoba Moose of the AHL playing out of the same building. There's Bell MTS Iceplex. There's the Foundation. There's a number of accounts that kind of he has to keep an eye on the marketing side of things.
Do you know how many? How many accounts?
Off the top of my head,
that he's managing roughly.
Well, the Jets one is primary for sure.
Yeah, and
then I believe he just kind of assists with or keeps an eye on, I would assume, the Moose one. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, maybe a little bit the Foundation. A lot of those other accounts have people that are kind of in charge of it. Mm-hmm. But I think when it comes to things like analytics and stuff, John, as well as our director of digital, Andrew Wilkinson, will kind of be the ones compiling the stats, just for whether it's presentation reasons or what have you. So
yeah, a lot of people don't realize or think of this if they haven't had the ability or they don't need to manage that many accounts, is that each platform is different. So you don't want to just share the same picture, video, and comment across all platforms, because there's different people using different platforms, right? Yeah, exactly.
And even for things like video.
Yeah.
So what we do normally is we'll put the videos up the videos up in their entirety on Twitter. So if people want to watch them, they can. If they, want to click the link and instead go to the website, they can. Mm-hmm. But there's a difference in even how we do that across all the mediums. So on Twitter, every single one will go up as long as it's under 10 minutes, because I think that's the time limit that Twitter allows you. Every single one will go up just because you're constantly feeding that beast, because it's just rolling over on itself in terms of just the sheer amount of content that's out there. Facebook's a bit different. I believe John just picks one that is either particularly engaging or that he thinks will do the best, and then that one will play on your timeline, but he just links to all the other ones. Mm-hmm. So if you want to see Paul Maurice, he doesn't happen to be that feature video, click here, away you go. Mm-hmm. And then on Instagram, we really don't even put any interviews, because it's not the best for that platform, right?
Yeah.
Whereas even what gets posted on Instagram's changed since I started, because the algorithm has changed so much.
Yeah.
We used to put, first period, second period, third period, and final score graphics. But now, because the algorithm's so different, all we put up is the final score. Because what you would end up having is a fan would wake up in the morning after we played a game and see, the first period recap, which isn't, at that point, doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah.
You have a final score graphic that can tell you pretty much everything you need to know.
Yeah.
So just seeing how that's all kind of changed is crazy to me.
Yeah. I think we'll have to do a round 2 of just social media, because we could dive deep into many rabbit holes.
Real deep.
Especially across all the different platforms. So you have kind of landed a really unique position. We'll switch gears a little bit here, because I know you're pressed for time.
Yeah, it's all good.
So you landed a unique position in the sense that you actually get to travel with the team, because there's a number of positions that I'm sure are just housed in Winnipeg and you stay put.
Yeah.
So what's it like traveling across North America with an NHL franchise?
It's cool. It's cool just mainly because I think you get an appreciation for how quickly everything happens. So one of the first things that caught my eye, my first road trip was in Chicago, and I think it was only a couple of days after I started.
Wow.
Was how... Yeah, I jumped right into it.
Welcome on board.
I covered a game on the 2nd, and then I think we traveled on the 3rd and played in Chicago on the 4th. Like, it was... Yeah, you jump right into the meat of the NHL schedule.
Yeah.
The first thing that caught my eye, and it's usually the first thing I tell everybody about, is how quickly people move post-game when you're on the road. It is crazy. So for me, what happens is, usually with a few minutes left, I come down from the press box and kind of wait outside the room, watch the end of the game on the mini monitors that are down there. And buzzer goes, players come in. I believe the NHL mandates the doors to the room have to be open to the media within 5 minutes of that final buzzer. By the time we walk in there, there's a time that's written on the whiteboard, and that's when the buses are leaving. And it's usually about 35 to 40 minutes after that buzzer. So in that amount of time, what usually happens is we get about 3 interviews done. We get Paul Maurice does his coach's availability, and then we might have enough time, after we do coach, we run out to either the bench or somewhere, just do a quick post-game video wrap-up report. And then by the time we're done all that, we might have enough time to transfer the footage from the camera into the laptop. And so then that time hits, get on the bus, and then you're on the way to the airport. While that's happening, while we're doing all that, the trainers are packing up everything, whether it's gear, skate sharpeners, all that stuff. They do some of it during the game, but the end is just an absolute, like, everybody just get out of the way because they got so much stuff to move and get looked over by, whether it's airport personnel, all that kind of stuff, before we go on to the next city. So everybody kind of does their best to stay out of the trainer's way because they know that is the most stressful time of night for them.
Yeah.
And then after we shoot our report, we get on our bus, and myself, and whether it's Tyler or Daniel or Jamie if he's in my spot at that time, basically at that point I'm writing my post-game report. Tyler and Daniel are editing the video and putting it up and trying to get it to John as quickly as possible. And then after all that is done, it's just compile it all on the website, make sure it's easy to find for fans, and you want to have that done before the plane's in the air, roughly about between 4 hours and 15 minutes after the game starts.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's like the part that is, it's the most fun because you're really challenging yourself, and that is like one of the most exhilarating parts of what I do, because there's fans that want to see this stuff, right? So you're hammering it away, and a lot of times on the road, outside of like the broadcast cameras that TSN will have at the game, we're the only ones shooting it. So it's like we got to get that stuff up real fast because we want A, the engagement on it to be good, and B, you want the fans to almost develop that expectation that no matter where the team is, these interviews are coming.
Yeah,
that's the kind of standard, I guess, we kind of hold ourselves to, is we want to get that. We have our fake deadline, quote unquote, is 4 hours after puck drop to have everything up. Do we hit it all the time? We come close. The only thing that has changed a little bit over the years is we used to handle the uploads to our site, and then we would click a button and it would be published and there would be a link available. What happens now is we upload all of our video to kind of like a portal, and that gets sent over to people in Newark, New Jersey. And then what they do is they take that video that's rendered out to a certain spec, whether, I'm not going to pretend to know exactly how all that is, but what they do then is they take that video, render it out a bunch of more times so it fits your phone or your laptop, or if you're putting it on Apple TV, or no matter how you're watching it, the video will be as good a quality as they can get it. And there won't be as much buffering or anything like that because it's not trying to upload a bigger file. And then after all that's done, they send us a link so that, we can put it on the site and people can watch it from our video player. So that part of the process is kind of out of our control because we don't know, because they could have 15 games going on one night and they're getting bombarded with a bunch of videos. So we try to take it easy on them because I can only imagine what that's like.
Yeah.
So yeah, that part of it is why I say sometimes we make that 4-hour deadline, sometimes we don't. But yeah, that's the main thing I always talk to people about with the travel part of it is post game. And on a completely separate note, the one thing that always gets to me is you sometimes hear Paul Maurice talk about time zones and how many time zones they've been in. I understand that. Yeah, the biggest time zone jump we go to is 2 hours, so that's to Vancouver, or California or anything like that. But it's the hardest part for a team that's kind of in the central, which the Winnipeg Jets are, is bouncing. So you go to the east, back home to Vancouver, so you're 2 hours behind, to Mountain Time, so now you're in Calgary. Back to Pacific, back to Central, and you're just kind of bouncing over the course of 6-7 weeks.
Yeah,
that's when it really starts to catch up to you. You get a little bit fatigued because a lot of the travel comes after games, right? So you're usually not getting into your hotel to 1:30, 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
But that's why there are some mornings that I wake up and I'm just I'm really tired. I'm glad I don't have to play a hockey game tonight.
Yeah.
And then the team will go on the ice and they'll get the job done and win the hockey game. So kudos to them because there are some days I'm in the press box and I'm feeling pretty tired because of it. But I mean that's why they're the best athletes in the world. They figure out how to get it done.
Yeah. And what's been some of the favorite cities that you've traveled to?
The funny part about the cities that we go to is a lot of times you're seeing a hotel, rink, airport. So I remember my wife was going down to Boston one time and she said, "Hey, what are some things to do there?" I was like, well, so it kind of depends on the schedule, whether you have a lot of time to kind of hang out and whether it's go for dinner somewhere neat or go sightseeing. But just based on some of the experiences that I've had, I really like New York, just because of the fact that it's got New York and LA kind of have this feel of quote unquote big city. You're kind of anytime when the Jets play the Rangers and we're in Madison Square Garden, it feels pretty neat. Just because the history of the building, the history of kind of what's gone on there. LA kind of very similar. It's got that very Hollywood feel. Anytime you go to Staples Center, you see the banners from the LA Lakers and the Kings, and it's just it's got that big city feel. The Jets have kind of developed a bit of a rivalry with Nashville over the last couple of seasons, and so I really like going there just because their fans are quite rabid as well. So, and also they've got a street. If anybody's curious about what Nashville is like and wants to check it out because people are talking about it, they've got a street called Broadway where the rink is kind of at the end of the street, and then for about 3 blocks leading up to the rink, they've got bars and restaurants with live bands and all that kind of stuff. That's the street that during the year that Nashville went to the Stanley Cup final, I believe in 2016, got shut down, and they just had fans covering it. So that was kind of their version of the Whiteout and the Whiteout Street Party and stuff like that. Everybody was pretty much in yellow. So Nashville's a good town just to go and experience kind of how they enjoy the game. I mean, one of the first things that kind of pops into mind is Vegas, but it's interesting because Vegas was exciting to me for reasons that I don't think would be cliche, because I remember when we went there in November for the first time, and it was just kind of okay, well, let's kind of see how they've embraced this or whatever, and their crowd's great.
Yeah.
their game production is very different than ours, whether it's, movie clips or the game presentation in terms of how they do their pregame. They have a night that comes on the ice, and it's almost like a live action role play type deal. But it's good. It gets the crowd into it, and that's the kind of stuff that you have to do in Vegas to get that kind of attendance. And I mean, we played them in the playoffs in 2018, and it was great there too. Like, their fans are really into it, and so it's been a pleasant surprise to kind of see how jacked up the fans in Vegas are for their team. So
yeah.
I do have to give them kudos for that. That being said, they eliminated us last year, so I didn't mind beating them 4-1 earlier this year. It doesn't erase it, but for some reason it just feels good. And I wasn't even on the ice. So.
Yeah. Well, it makes it, even from a spectator watching the games at home, enjoyable to see what they're doing. You get to enjoy a show even watching it in your living room at home. And I think it probably has, I'm sure, maybe spark some ideas with other NHL teams on how to provide that experience, how to add that other element of just even watching a game.
Even things like the on-ice projection screens, like that's basically where they project an image. It's like 3D onto the ice surface, and the ice surface almost becomes one big movie screen.
Yeah,
and they're playing video off of it and everything. That started out like one rink tried it, and now you go to, I don't want to say it's probably less than half, but there's a fair amount of rinks now that have it.
Yeah.
And it's really cool, and it's been interesting to see kind of how it's evolved. Some rinks will play the movie on the ice and have nothing on their kind of center hung scoreboard, and then they'll stop the projection on the ice and they'll put it on the scoreboard just so that you're focusing where you should be focusing.
Yeah.
So that you're not missing anything if you're looking at one different direction. So, like I said, it's been cool to kind of see it all evolve. And I'm curious, honestly, to see what the next step is in that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And that 4-hour quote-unquote goal that you guys have to have everything wrapped up from the time that the puck drops.
Yeah.
That's a crazy timeline. And I think of pre-social media and the amount of work. No doubt it was still a lot of work to put on and showcase a hockey game across the country. But to add all these elements of social media to it is just something that I think the ones that thrive really grasp and understand the importance of it and really want to devote a lot of time and effort into it, because it's just you're broadening your reach, right?
Yeah, and that was one of the big reasons I think behind our team going from 2 people to 4.
Yeah,
was just because we wanted to do these pre and post game shows, but kudos to the organization for realizing that if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. Yeah, we're not going to try to force the group to do it with less than what would be required. So I know a lot of research went into it, and for good reason, because I talked a little bit about, on top of that 4-hour deadline, is you want to develop the expectation.
Yeah.
So that fans know that, it's an hour before a home game. I know that this pregame show is going to be on, and I know I'm going to learn something from it, or I know what I'm going to get.
Yeah.
And some fans really like it. And I know we kind of changed it a little bit for the playoffs last year, because we figured, what? Fans are probably going to be pretty into this. So what we ended up doing was we moved it from an hour before the game to during all the morning skates. So before, say, a 7 o'clock game, the home team will skate at 10:30 for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. For a lot of guys, it's just going out there if they've got a nagging injury to see if they're good to go. But for the majority, it's just to get a feel for the puck that day, and just because these guys are so fine-tuned, just to get an idea of how they're feeling. And then they're off the ice. Visiting team comes on at 11:30. Same deal. After every skate, there's media availability, coach availability. So what we ended up doing was we went live starting about 5 minutes before the Jets morning skate at 10:30, and then just ran the thing constantly for 2 hours. And so you could kind of have a look in at the morning skate. Jamie Thomas would be hosting, and he'd have a couple of guests on, whether it's visiting media or visiting national media, which becomes a big thing during the playoffs. And then we'd kind of run through the player interviews whenever they came available. And so it was just a constant kind of feed, and fans could check in whenever they wanted to. And we found those shows did extremely well, just because, some people maybe are busy between 10 and 11, whether they're in a meeting or something, or they got 10 minutes when they get out of that meeting, or whether it's during their lunch hour to kind of sit down and take a look. Well, everything's archived. You're able to kind of go back, watch it through, or get to the parts that you want to see, and away you go. So even within the expectation that we're trying to create, or the routine, quote unquote, that we're trying to get fans into, the beautiful part about social media and digital is that you're not tied down to a TV guide or anything like that. You're able to make adjustments like we did during the playoffs last year, and it really pays off sometimes.
For sure. And without getting in trouble,
I would never get in trouble.
Can you share any behind-the-scenes stories or experiences that pop out of just being on the road, or just even being here?
The one thing that I will say is, in terms of like being around the players and stuff like that, the guys we have on our team are all great. Like it's interesting to kind of see. Like, I remember I got married in August of 2015, and so I think it was early on that season. Would have been September or October, and I just happened to run into Buff in the hallway, and he was just like, "Hey, how was your summer?" and all that kind of stuff. And then he just kind of said, "You got married, didn't you?" And I was just like, "How'd you?" He's like, "You have a ring on your finger." I was just like, "Oh yeah, I guess." But yeah, that's just the kind of guys that there are, right? So a guy like Adam Lowry will ask kind of what Netflix show you're into. Like they're just all like really good guys that, we both kind of realize that, or they realize that I've got a job to do, and asking them questions and stuff like that. But at the same time, they I think value the relationship that they have with us and everything. So it's not like there's like any wild stories from the road or anything. There just aren't. And I know sometimes people ask me about it, and I'm just like, it's not really that crazy.
They're there to work at the end of the day, right?
That's exactly it. And if their performance isn't up to par, they hear about it. And so it's a great group that we have, and a lot of guys that you could see why that dressing room is so close. The times that we're in there doing media, I mean, there's been a bunch of times where even talking to, say, Patrick Laine, he's doing a media scrum with a bunch of reporters. You'll hear Nikolai Ehlers chirping him from the corner. You know what I mean? Like, that kind of. And Patrick is just so comfortable with the media. He'll turn and chirp Ehlers back, and away they go. He'll just keep doing his thing. So it's really cool to kind of see that little bit of like relationship that the players have with each other, because in the end, like, you have this group in the dressing room, and you're trying to win a Stanley Cup together. You're going to go through some ups and downs in the season, and the closer you are as a group, the easier those ups and downs are going to be.
For sure, absolutely. And speaking of Laine, am I saying that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. You got the opportunity to travel over the summer.
Yes.
And can you just share with us about what that experience was like?
Yeah. So with the Jets earlier this season, we were part of the NHL's Global Series, so they pick a few teams every year to play in some different spots overseas. So with Patrick Laine being from Finland and being a significant star there, we were selected along with Florida to play in Helsinki November 1st and 2nd, which was really cool. And it was cool to be there for those couple of games. But so just to kind of get ahead of it, instead of trying to cram a bunch of stuff into a few days while we were there, myself and Tyler and one of our communications guys headed out to Helsinki in August during the summer there. So what we did was we got there and hung out with. First day we were there, we just kind of did a bunch of scenic shots and stuff, just so that we had some video of Helsinki and the rink that we were going to be playing in and all that. Then the second day we hung out with Christian Vesalainen, who we chose in the 2017, 2017 draft. Who's also from Finland. So he kind of took us around Helsinki to his favorite spots. Favorite lunch spots, where he kind of played outdoor hockey, outdoor soccer. So that was really cool because he's in front of camera. He's a really kind of like quiet, confident guy, but when you get him just kind of talking and everything like that, and in Helsinki, in his hometown where he feels really comfortable and all that, he was great, and I think it really showcased kind of the personality that he has. The next day, we were on our way to a place called Turku, which is a couple hours outside of Helsinki. But we stopped about an hour out at a rink that Teemu Selanne was hanging around at.
Oh, no way.
We talked to his agent a little bit. We were just like, so what are the odds we could get a quick chat with him? And he's just like, yeah, of course. We're like, oh, okay.
Let me get my camera ready.
Yeah, so we had kind of set it up, but it was going to just kind of depend on how the timing worked out that day, and because Timo had a number of things going on, as he always does. And I remember finishing the interview with him, and we were just kind of packing up, and I asked him, so, like, what else do you got going on today? He's like, well, might go out on my boat. It's a nice day. It's like, he's always got something going on. But the other thing that sits with me too from that experience was afterwards he's just sitting in the cafeteria in the rink, like having a bowl of soup, and people are just leaving him alone. You know what I mean? So that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Just letting him kind of have his lunch without bombarding him.
Yeah.
Then the next day was when we met up with Patrick.
Yeah.
At his training facility, and that he works out at. A number of NHL players work out there, so we kind of took video of him working out. And then later that night, in a place called Rauma, Finland, which was another hour or so away, he was playing as part of kind of a Finnish League alumni all-star game. So we went there, and actually, the people. There was so Patrick was there. There's Teemu Selanne was playing. A number of former Jets like Teppo Numminen were playing. Even more other current players like Alexander Barkov, who played for the Panthers, who the Jets played in November. He was the other big celebrity that weekend. And Mikko Koivu from the Minnesota Wild. Like, it was just a who's who of Finnish hockey players. It was really neat.
Wow.
And just to see how different it is to watch a game there, like the crowds were going nuts. And then that was when we really got to kind of see how big of a deal Patrick is there. He got off the ice and was walking down the tunnel toward the dressing room, and there are kids and people just hanging over trying to get autographs from him. And good on him. Him and Teemu stood out there for, it had to have been 15, 20 minutes, just kind of going around the tunnel, signing whatever they could. And they were really good with their time. And then, so after that was all done, the next day we hopped on a plane and came home. So It was a really cool experience just to be able to see Finland. And that way, when we got there in November, we were pretty comfortable with where we were at.
Yeah, for sure. What a great experience.
It was neat. Yeah, like I'd never been overseas before. So that was going to be a first for me. And we learned that a lot of the Finnish schools in the southern part of the country, I guess, teach English. Like the kids there learn English, so that's why guys like Patrick and a number of other Finnish players come over, and they've got a pretty good grasp on the English language. But in the northern side of it, it's not as common. So we have one player, Sami Niku, who we drafted a few years ago, that is learning English and is doing a fantastic job at it, because I don't know how well I could learn a second language. So for him to learn something like English, which is not an easy language to learn, whether it's verb tense or anything like that, he's doing a really good job at it, and is confident enough now to do an interview in front of camera and stuff, which is, I can't even imagine what that's like.
And even playing the sport with people that don't speak the same language.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can call for the puck in any language just by yelling, yeah. But I mean, when you're trying to talk strategy, it can be really tough. So yeah, I always say good on players that kind of come over to North America, regardless of where they're from, because learning a second language is hard. And actually, when we drafted Nikolai Ehlers in 2014, he's from Denmark, and I learned he knows 5 languages.
Holy!
Like, it's unbelievable. Like, I think he knows French, English, obviously. There's a couple other ones in there too. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And so I always like have an incredible appreciation for people that, I have learned a second language or have moved and were forced to learn a second language. Like, it is so difficult to do. So I mean, shout out to everybody that's been able to do that.
Yeah, for 2 and let alone 5.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a huge achievement. Right on. So just a couple more questions, and we'll wrap up. So switching gears to what you guys are working on now, talking about different mediums, growing platforms on social media, etc. So another one is what we're doing right now, podcasting. So tell us about the podcast that you are a part of.
Ground Control, the official podcast of the Winnipeg Jets.
There you go.
It's something that I think we've been interested in doing for a couple years, but growing from 2 to 4 has made it a little bit more possible. We spent last season focused mostly on making sure the pre and post game shows were good to go. And then so this year we're like, okay, we feel confident with where those are at. Let's add in the podcasting side of things. So we did all the background research on where we wanted to post it and everything, and what kind of infrastructure we needed in place, or what details we needed to figure out to get it where we wanted it to be. And then at that point it was just figuring out a format. So usually for us it's just we talk Jets for the first 10 minutes or so, and then we have a feature interview, which can either be with one of our players. We've had both Adam Lowry and Mark Scheifele on it, or it's media members, or it's even a guy like Claude Lemieux, who never played for the Jets but is a dad of Brendan Lemieux, who does play for the Jets. And he was on, we just happened to be around him at one point. We just said, hey, like, would you want to do a quick 15-minute chat? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. So he sat down and he talked about his career. He won 4 Stanley Cups, so he's had quite a career.
Wow.
And he also has now become a player agent, which is something that he said he was kind of always interested in. He actually represents his son, so that's an interesting dynamic. Then we just talked to him as a hockey dad. You know what I mean? Like, being able to see his son, like, because he had his dad he had Brendan in the dressing rooms when he was a young kid, like, just around the NHL, and he said so it's been really kind of flattering to see that this was something that he wanted to pursue, and he was able to get to that level. So we talk about a whole wide range of things on the podcast, which is awesome, because I mentioned we had Lowry and Scheifele on, two guys that are under 25, if memory serves, and then it's neat to see how just kind of laid back they are and that kind of stuff. It's a platform that we can talk about hockey as much as they want, but we can also talk about anything else. Yeah. So, like, Adam Lowry talks a lot about fantasy football and the league that they have in the room, and how much they chirp each other over it. Yeah. And Mark Scheifele talked a lot about his Netflix stuff and how he was learning tennis, how he and another player on the team are trying to learn how to play drums, and like, it's just, you get a really good idea of who these people are just because you have the time, and it's just a lot more conversational sometimes, I find.
What made you guys want to get into podcasting? What was the initial,
I think it's just another way for fans to consume content. It's another way for either them to learn about the personalities of the players, like I just mentioned, or it's just a different, like I said, it's just a different way for fans to enjoy what we do. And it helps us kind of bring attention to what we do as well, because a lot of times, like, we did a a holiday video this year where, we had this minor hockey team come in and practice at Bell MTS Place. They'd had a little bit of adversity at the start of the year in terms of one player getting hurt and stuff like that. So we just said, well, come and have a practice at our rink. We'll give you some swag and all that kind of stuff. And we ended up having a little bit more of a surprise for them with Patrick Laine showing up and skate with them for a little while. So just videos like that. We talk a little bit about kind of the behind the scenes of it and what kind of things that, maybe didn't get in the video, but were really cool to see. So just a way to kind of get a little bit more of a behind the scenes look and then get to know the players as well.
And you guys record it at...
Yeah, it's at work. In the office. We recorded one in our hotel room in Finland.
Oh, nice.
Basically wherever people are at the time, where we try to figure out a way to make it work.
Yeah, and what kind of mic or mics and can you talk about the equipment? Because I want to share with everyone my equipment.
Yeah, it depends. We have, I wouldn't be able to name the exact mics. They're pretty standard handheld, though. That much I do know.
Yeah.
But it also, our equipment and setup also depends where we're at.
Right.
So our laptops have the Adobe suite on it, so a lot of it is done through Audition.
Yeah.
Then we have a soundboard as well that happened to be I think Game Production used it at one point, but then they kind of did some renovations and didn't need it anymore. So we're just like, well, maybe it'll work, and it did. So we have a soundboard that the 4 mics will plug into, and then the soundboard goes into the laptop. And but if we're on the road and we have 2 people, so similar to the Claude Lemieux interview that I was just talking about, we did that in the rink in Dallas about a week or so ago.
Yeah.
And all that was 2 mics plugged into the camera, because that's as much as one camera can take is 2 mic inputs. And then we just hit record on the camera. And so the camera video-wise was shooting, I think, the back of a chair. But the video didn't matter. We just needed the audio, right? So we had a nice 15-minute clip where you just take the video out and you got your audio. So
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've done it a couple of different ways. We've had to do a couple over the phone. So I think that's kind of what we're experimenting with right now, is figuring out what kind of recording works best for audio quality. FaceTime audio, I think, so far is winning, but we're still kind of experimenting at this point.
Over what? What else did you try?
Just I think pretty general apps. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head.
Skype? Did you guys ever try?
No,
Skype?
we haven't tried Skype yet. I think that's the next test.
Yeah.
Whenever we need to do another phone one. So we'll see. That might be the next one.
Yeah. Yeah, and for those wondering, because I've had a number of people ask me, how do you do a podcast? How does it work? So right now, we're just sitting in my basement, and there's my MacBook Air laptop, and we're recording off of GarageBand, and there's a USB plugged into the Blue Yeti microphone, and I got a pop filter over top of the microphone, and that's it. It's very bare bones, and I have the setting on the mic to bi-directional, and Mitch and I are just sitting across from one another, so it's very bare bones setup. I'd like to get eventually 2 mics, but I know once you get into 2 mics, I'm sure you have to get a mixer, and then you can just kind of build it from there. So I'm trying to keep it very lean.
And I'm looking forward to kind of seeing how it continues to build, because it's one of those things where so my wife and I are kind of this completely unrelated. My wife and I are we're really into smart home stuff. But we found once you get one thing, it's just it keeps on building. It's oh man, it's so cool having our lights be able to do that. We should do that in every room. And then it just, you know what I mean? So it'll start, the same thing with podcasting. It'll be, get the other mic and be oh yeah, I really like that. Maybe I could build onto this. And then it just keeps going.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Awesome. Well, one last question, and then we'll wrap it up. where do you see the NHL heading in the future? And maybe you can build on it and talk about things that you the direction or things that you like and things that you'd like maybe to see corrected.
That's an interesting question because I mean, social media I think is going to continue to build and build and build. I think the thing that I'm going to be most curious in is how different the contracts are for things like national broadcasting rights or anything like that. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm a genius in terms of how all that works, because I'm definitely not. But just with the rise of digital, I'm curious to see how sports networks, regardless of who it is, build some sort of digital content plan or digital rights or something like that into the contract. I'm just that part of it, just because when the last national rights deal was done, and even the one before that, obviously, digital was still it was a thing, but it's nowhere near where it is now. So that's probably going to be the part that I'm most curious about, whether it's, if a station is kind of hampered by, well, we can't maybe guarantee to have a post-game show this long or whatever it may be, maybe they could say, but, we do have this massive footprint online. Like, I don't know, maybe that's where it goes. But that's kind of what I'm curious about, because I do think that that's the next step. And you see a bunch of stations, whether it's TSN, Sportsnet, anything that now have these streaming services and ways to access content online. I'm just really curious to see if that plays a bigger role in kind of the next big negotiating deal.
And I think TSN is also owned by Disney, if I'm not mistaken.
That one I'd really have to look into. I always know them as Bell Media, and that is the main thing for me. But that's I could be wrong. I looked at a infographic of what Disney owns recently,
and I think TSN fell under that behemoth of an infographic because Disney owns everything.
Pretty much.
It's amazing. That's really interesting.
Like I said, I don't know nearly enough about the ins and outs of how all that stuff comes together, but I'll be very curious to see.
Yeah, and in terms of, I guess we'll just end on what you're hoping for in this season and coming up, and you can talk about anything else that you're interested in as well.
One of the most exciting parts about last season was the playoffs, and getting as far as we did. There's never a guarantee that you're gonna make the playoffs again in the next year, or for that matter, get as far as we ended up getting into the semifinal, basically. You look at a team like Nashville, who went all the way to the Stanley Cup final, and then, a couple of years later, they lose in Game 7 to us in the second round. So no matter how good of a team you are, sometimes it just comes down to how good are you on one particular night, and that could dictate your whole season. So, I'm doing my best to kind of embrace the journey itself, because, otherwise you're letting kind of the present day go by you, and that's never a good way to handle things. So that being said, should things continue the way that they are in the regular season and the Jets are back in the playoffs, I'm really looking forward to that. Mm-hmm. Because like we've kind of talked about, there's just no atmosphere like it. Mm-hmm. And I can only imagine how difficult it was for the players at the start of the year to kind of get amped up to try to, because you got to earn your spot again. You're starting back from preseason game number 1 after being in the Western Conference Finals. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then just, even just statistically from a digital standpoint, we've been kind of keeping an eye on how things are progressing throughout the year, and our video views are kind of hovering right around the same as last year, so that's good. And I know when the playoffs came, there was a big spike. So fingers crossed for that again, and just continued growth overall. I like to continue to see us develop the pre- and post-game shows even further. And one thing that's kind of been exciting for us so far is the last 3-ish years or so, we've really worked hard to develop the written side of our site. Mm-hmm. whether it's through profiles or articles or whatever it may be. And we're seeing a lot of increases in article reads this year. So fingers crossed that continues. So hoping for a lot of things. And then, maybe the ultimate prize at the end of June would be awesome too. But long way to go there.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. So thank you very much for taking the time to come down here. I know my basement's a little chilly. We're getting a little bit cold here.
So. Oh, wait, not a problem. I'm good. I'm in hockey rinks all the time, so this is nothing.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for your time, Mitch.
Anytime, Dean.
All right, take care.
Hi guys, Dean again. Just a couple things before I take off. First, thanks for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please leave a review on whichever platform you're currently listening on. This podcast can be found on Apple, Google, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Stitcher, Anchor.fm, Breaker, Radio Public, Castbox, and I also uploaded it to my YouTube channel. So feel free to go and leave a review on whichever platform you are listening on. And if you want to leave any feedback, feel free to do so in the review, but also head over to www.simpletounderstand.com and leave a comment in the comment section at the bottom of each episode, where you can also find the show notes. So feel free to head over there or on our YouTube channel, my YouTube channel, and check it out. So thanks very much for your time, and have yourself a great day. And until next time, take care.